Right before our wedding, my fiancé, Ethan, and I went to pick up his custom-made wedding tuxedo. It turned out he couldn't even squeeze into it anymore. In just one short month, he had gained over 10 pounds. I called off the engagement right then and there. He laughed bitterly, rubbing his temples. Just because I can't fit into a tuxedo? I can lose the weight, okay? I shook my head. No. During your last checkup, you were diagnosed with fatty liver. For your health, you promised me you'd watch your diet. But instead of cutting back, you went completely wild. I calmly pulled up screenshots of his Instagram posts, the ones he had blocked me from seeing. In the photo, a young, slim woman was feeding him cake. And they were inside the new house Ethan and I had just bought. His eyes widened in shock. I continued to press him. I was the one eating salads and chicken breasts with you every single day. So who is the woman in these photos feeding you lasagna, ribs, and burgers? Ethan froze, his face turning pale. Chloe, let me explain. Before he could even get the words out, his phone started ringing. For the past month, someone had been calling him at this exact time every single day. Thinking back, it definitely had nothing to do with work. Without looking up, I said, "Put it on speaker." The phone rang for a full 30 seconds. Finally, he slid the screen to answer and pressed the speaker button. Ethan, I made roasted chicken today. When are you coming over? Ethan was sweating bullets, his lips trembling slightly. He finally said in a hoarse voice, "I'm not coming." Then he frantically hung up. That woman was Ethan's ex-girlfriend of 10 years, Brooke Vance. I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. After all this time, it's still her, huh? Grabbing my car keys off the table, I walked toward the door. Come on. Let's go get some roasted chicken. After a 20-minute drive, we finally arrived at our new house. The remodeling had just finished last month. I'm a big believer in romance and milestones. I had wanted to wait until our wedding night to officially move into our new co-purchased home. I had even custom-ordered a luxury bed for the master bedroom that cost over $9,000. I hadn't even laid on it once. Yet another woman had already slept in it. A wave of intense nausea washed over me. I felt like throwing up. Chloe. Brooke was just laid off, and her landlord scammed her out of her money. She had nowhere else to go. She came to me crying, and since we went to school together, I just let her crash here temporarily. During the few minutes we spent waiting for the elevator, he kept trying to explain, but I was too exhausted to listen. The moment the door opened, even though I thought I had prepared myself, my heart still ached. I had been too busy with work lately. Plus, Ethan had kept telling me the house was still off-gassing toxic fumes from the fresh paint and remodeling, saying it wasn't safe for my health. So I hadn't visited the place at all. Now looking at it, I didn't even recognize my own home. There was a pink slipcover over the sofa. The dining table was decorated with white roses and baby's breath. The kitchen was fully stocked with cookware. A pot of beef stew was bubbling on the stove, sending up hot steam. It felt like a giant hand was squeezing my throat. I could barely breathe. Woof woof woof. A small Pomeranian suddenly ran out of the bedroom. Brooke followed right behind it. The woman and the dog looked far more like the masters of this house than I did. I was so angry I almost laughed out loud. Brooke nervously wrung her fingers. Chloe, I really had no other choice. I'll move out as soon as I find a place. Before I could even explode, Ethan beat me to it. Brooke, I've done more than enough for you. I'm giving you 2 more days. If you still can't find a job, pack your bags and go back to your hometown. Stop ruining my life. He marched into the living room, ripped the pink cover off the sofa, swept the flowers off the table, and threw them all into the trash. This is my home with Chloe. Letting you stay here was out of pity. Don't push your luck. Brooke burst into tears at his words. She scooped up her dog, looking completely lost. Ethan, please don't be so mean, okay? Don't call me Ethan. You don't have the right. Ethan seemed furious. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought Brooke had moved in without his permission. He pointed at the roasted chicken and beef stew on the table. I didn't even want to eat this trash. You forced me to. In the next second, he literally flipped the table. The scalding hot soup splashed onto Brooke, making her gasp. Blisters instantly bubbled up on her wrist. Tears streamed down her face silently. She looked at Ethan with deep sorrow and asked, "Do you really hate my cooking that much? Or are you just terrified of Chloe, saying things you don't mean? Every time you came over, you were starving. Chloe practically starved you with her strict diets, but you still chose to take her abuse. I felt so bad for you, and yet you treat me like this." She sobbed even harder. Back then, nothing happened between Julian and me. We just had too much to drink. I love you so much. How could I ever betray you? Shut up. A flash of intense agony crossed Ethan's face. Oh right. I almost forgot. They didn't break up because their love faded. They broke up because Ethan believed Brooke had cheated on him. Ethan and Brooke had been together since high school. They were each other's first loves. From high school all the way through his graduate studies, their relationship lasted a whole decade. It was so long that they had practically become a part of each other's DNA. If Ethan hadn't caught Brooke and his best friend, Julian, lying in the same bed, they would probably be married by now. After the breakup, it took Ethan a whole year to recover from the trauma. He was my father's favorite PhD student. With my dad playing matchmaker, the two of us eventually started dating. When Brooke found out, she even threatened suicide. She posted all over Snapchat and Instagram, accusing me of being the homewrecker who ruined their relationship. All of their mutual friends treated me like an intruder in their circle. They refused to accept me and were openly hostile. But Ethan had always stood firmly by my side. I thought at the very least our love was solid. I never expected that after all this time, he and Brooke were still tangled up. If our mutual friend hadn't sent me screenshots of the Instagram posts he hid from me, I would still be kept in the dark. My heart felt like it was being squeezed, throbbing with a dull pain. Brooke's sobbing pulled me back to reality. Looking at the absolute mess in front of me, I didn't want to stay for another second. I turned around and walked out. Chloe. Ethan chased after me, leaving the apartment. But before he left, he didn't forget to toss Brooke a couple of band-aids to treat her burned wrist. It looked cold, but it was a twisted form of caring. Chloe, slow down, let me explain. I really didn't want her to stay in our new house. But she's crazy. If I didn't help her, she threatened to kill herself. She's been this extreme since college. She had a terrible childhood, an abusive father, and her mother ran off with another man. She doesn't have a good family or a support system like you do. She's honestly pathetic. I wanted to laugh again, purely out of anger. So, is it my fault that I have a good family? Ethan ran his hands through his hair in frustration. No, that's not what I meant. I'll handle this immediately, I swear. Just please forgive me. He was so frantic that his eyes were red, looking like he was about to cry. Right then, his phone started vibrating like crazy again. One call after another came in. Ethan kept declining them. Finally, he picked up the last one and screamed into the receiver. Brooke, you psycho. Stop calling me. To prove his loyalty to me, he blocked her number right in front of my face. Chloe, you're the only one I love, seriously. Please don't leave me. I have to admit, at that moment, my heart softened. We had been together for 3 years. It would be a lie to say I felt nothing. Besides, our families were a perfect match. Marrying him was the most logical choice for my future. I didn't say anything. I silently drove back to my old apartment. For the rest of the night, Ethan was incredibly attentive. Chloe, I promise I'll change my attitude and completely cut ties with that lunatic. I will lose weight and get back to my normal size before the wedding. If I ever contact her again, I hope I get hit by a car. He made his vows with absolute conviction. Yet, when I woke up in the middle of the night, he was gone. I called him, and he claimed there was an emergency at the office and he had to work late. But I could clearly hear a woman's faint whimpering on the other end of the line. A bitter smile played on my lips. He really took me for a fool. I hung up and texted him 2 words. We're done. He immediately started calling back over and over. Text messages flooded my screen. Chloe, pick up. You're giving me a heart attack. Baby, please don't do this, okay? I'm begging you, please talk to me. But he didn't come home for the rest of the night. I packed my bags and left the apartment we had shared for 3 years. Today happened to be my father's birthday. I didn't want him to worry, so I forced myself to look cheerful and acted like nothing was wrong. Most of the guests had already arrived. Before the dinner started, Ethan actually showed up with a gift. When he saw my dad, he kept calling him dad and father-in-law with a big smile. I didn't want to make a scene in front of our family and friends, so I suppressed my disgust and played along. Halfway through, he put his arm around my shoulder, playing the doting fiancé. He leaned in close to my ear, whispering in a voice only I could hear. Chloe, stop being mad. I promised that was the last time. I've already kicked that crazy woman out of our house. As he was making this solemn promise, he had no idea that the crazy woman had tracked him down right here. Brooke's eyes were bloodshot, and she looked like she was about to collapse. When she called out Ethan's name, her voice was so raspy it sounded like she was swallowing glass. Ethan went completely stiff. A look of utter desperation and panic washed over him. What are you doing here? Brooke, are you trying to ruin my life? We broke up a long time ago. If you keep stalking me, I'm calling the cops. Get the hell out of here. He shielded me behind his back, throwing an icy glare at Brooke. Brooke was sobbing so hard she was hyperventilating, looking completely unhinged. She grabbed Ethan's sleeve tightly. No. I'm going to follow you forever. You'll never get rid of me. I've realized that I still love you. I can't live without you. The thought of you marrying another woman makes my heart ache so much I want to die. Call me pathetic, call me shameless, I don't care. I'm not letting you go. Ethan's face flushed with embarrassment. As for me, I wished the floor would open up and swallow me whole. Our family and friends were whispering all around us. In that instant, my head spun, and a wave of dizziness hit me. Using the last shred of my sanity, I told Ethan, if you want to make a scene, take it outside. Ethan, take this psycho and get the hell out of my house. Brooke let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Chloe, don't act so high and mighty. Who do you think drove me crazy? Ethan and I were together for 10 years. If it weren't for you, we'd be married by now. Do you really think he loves you? He only wants you for your family status and money. If you were stuck in the mud like me, do you think he'd even look at you twice? Brooke, shut the FCK up. Ethan's hands shook with panic. He grabbed Brooke by the arms and dragged her out of our house. Watching them walk away, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I ran into the bathroom. I threw up everything in my stomach. This 3-year relationship was like a piece of rotting flesh on my body. To cut it off, I had to endure the pain. After emptying my stomach completely, I stumbled out of the bathroom. Only then did I realize that all the guests had left. My parents were waiting by the door. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore, and wept uncontrollably. I don't want to marry him anymore. My mom pulled me into her arms, gently rubbing the back of my neck, just like she did when I was a little girl. Okay, baby, we won't marry him. We just want you to be happy. I cried so hard I could barely catch my breath. My head throbbed, and even breathing felt like a chore. In the next second, everything went black. I fainted. I had a fever of 104 degrees. By the time I was rushed to the hospital, my body was burning like fire. It felt like I slept through a long, endless nightmare. When I finally woke up, it was already evening. My parents had gone out to buy me some food. I was alone in the quiet hospital room. I could finally take a deep breath. But then, the door was suddenly pushed open. I wanted to scream. It was Ethan again. Chloe, I couldn't reach you. I had to call your parents, and they told me you were hospitalized. I was so worried. I gave him a weak, tired smile. We broke up. I don't need your worry. Leave. He shook his head frantically. Like a child who knew he did something terrible, he dropped to his knees by my bed. Chloe, I'm not breaking up with you. His voice trembled as he gripped my hand tightly, refusing to let go. He looked absolutely terrified of losing me. I looked at him coldly. If you stay with me, what about Brooke? He punched the wall in frustration. We broke up years ago. Even if she dies, it has nothing to do with me. I clearly caught the flicker of guilt in his eyes. His stubborn denial was honestly pathetic. Fine. Call Brooke over. Let's settle this once and for all. I knew Ethan wanted to keep me while continuing to mess around with Brooke. So, I decided to bring Brooke here and end this drama. I would step down and let them rot together. After a moment of hesitation, Ethan called Brooke. Once he hung up, he promised me confidently, "Don't worry, Chloe. When she gets here, I'll make sure she gets the message once and for all." He gently put his arm around my shoulder. He still smelled faintly of Brooke's woody perfume. It was sickening. 10 minutes later, Brooke arrived. She stumbled into the room, and without saying a word, she threw herself into Ethan's arms. Ethan, I was standing by the river just now. If you hadn't called, I would have jumped. Ethan's eyes flared with anger as he grabbed her by the shoulders. Can you stop with the f***ing drama? Do you really want to die that badly? His tone was filled with frustration, but also undeniable concern. Brooke bit her lip, tears streaming down her face. What do you think? You're marrying someone else. What's the point of me living? I swear, nothing happened between Julian and me. I'm 30 years old, and you're the only man I've ever had. Ethan let out a bitter, mocking laugh, staring at her with rage. Are you f***ing kidding me? When I pulled back the covers, neither of you had any clothes on. Julian was my best friend, and you were the woman I loved more than life itself. You two teamed up to cheat on me. Do you have any idea how much I wanted to die back then? Brooke was sobbing uncontrollably. I know you hate me. You only dated Chloe to get back at me. Don't you remember? The first time you guys slept together, you sent me a photo of you two in bed. You asked me if it hurt. It did. It hurt so much. But I didn't want you to marry a woman you don't love just to spite me. Brooke's body swayed, her bloodshot eyes turning to me. She stumbled to my bedside, her voice cracking. Chloe, we are so sorry. We've been torturing each other, and we dragged you into our mess. She unlocked her phone with trembling fingers and handed it to me. Look at this. The first time you two held hands, the first time you kissed, the first time you slept together. He texted me about all of it. He was just using you to hurt me. It felt like a giant hole had been ripped in my chest. Those texts, like a million needles, stabbed me over and over again. I kissed her today. It felt way better than kissing you. She's much sweeter than you. She does whatever I want in bed, unlike you who always complains about pain. We're getting married, you little psycho. Stay the FCK away from me now. Don't make me see you again. Stop making my heart ache. Brooke grabbed my sleeve. Do you see? He never loved you. So Chloe, please, I'm begging you. Set him free. Do you really want to be my substitute for the rest of your life? She begged me as if I were the one who had ruined her relationship. A substitute? The pain in my chest was unbearable. I couldn't stand looking at this star-crossed couple for another second. As I tried to get out of bed, Brooke grabbed my arm tightly. Chloe, please let us go. Stop holding on to Ethan. I couldn't take it anymore and pushed her away. Get away from me. I didn't use much force, but she fell backward, clutching her waist and crying out in pain. My back. Brooke. Before I could even process what happened, a violent force slammed into my back. I lost my balance and was thrown hard against the floor. My head struck the sharp corner of the bedside table. Warm blood instantly flowed down my neck, staining my hospital gown red. Clutching my head, I looked up with difficulty, meeting Ethan's furious glare. Chloe, you can treat me however you want. I owe you. But don't you dare touch her. With that, he gently picked Brooke up in his arms and carried her out of the room. He didn't look back at me even once. Shaking with pain, I crawled back to the bed and called the police. Then I dialed my father, who was also Ethan's PhD advisor. Dad, Ethan and his mistress just assaulted me. The blood was hot, thick, and smelled of copper. It ran down the curve of my temple, soaked into the collar of my hospital gown, and pooled onto the sterile linoleum floor. My vision swam in gray and red pulses. Every breath sent a sharp, nauseating jolt through the base of my skull. Through the heavy oak door of room 402, the muffled sound of Ethan's frantic, soothing voice drifted back to me. Hold on, Brooke. I've got you. The trio desk is right around the corner. Don't look at the blood, baby, just look at me. He hadn't looked back once. Not when my skull cracked against the beveled edge of the nightstand. Not when my body hit the floor with a dead, heavy thud. I dragged myself up on one elbow, my fingers slipping in my own blood. The emergency call button was dangling by its coiled white cord 2 feet above me. I reached up, my arm trembling so violently that my nails scraped uselessly against the plastic wall panel twice before I finally smashed the red button with the heel of my palm. The intercom buzzed instantly. Nurses station, how can we help you? Room 402. I whispered, my voice rattling with swallowed blood. Assault. I'm bleeding from the head. Call security and dial 911. 2 minutes later, the door flew open. A senior nurse and 2 orderlies rushed in, gasping at the sight of the blood on the floor. Within 30 seconds, gauze was pressed hard against my scalp, the metallic tang of saline washed over my eyes, and the room filled with the sharp, rapid cadence of medical panic. Pupils are uneven, the trauma resident muttered, shining a penlight directly into my eyes. We need an immediate head CT. Prep her for sutures and get a cervical collar on her right now. While they lifted me onto the gurney, I gripped my phone with white-knuckled desperation. My father answered on the second ring. Chloe? Sweetheart, your mother and I just bought the sea base for dinner. How? Is your fever? Did the 4 help? His voice was warm, grounding, carrying the steady, academic cadence of a man who had spent 40 years commanding university lecture halls and mentoring the brightest minds in engineering. Dad. I croaked, a single burning tear cutting a clean path through the blood on my cheek. Ethan just shoved me into the nightstand. He split my head open and carried Brooke out of the room. The line went dead silent. It was a silence so absolute, so dense, that I could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights in the hallway. When my father spoke again, his voice was stripped of all warmth. It was as cold as iron pulled from a frozen lake. Which floor are you on, Chloe? 4th. Trauma wing. Stay still. Let the doctors work. Your mother and I are 3 minutes away. He hung up. As the orderlies wheeled my gurney toward the radiology elevators, I looked down the corridor. 50 yards away, near the emergency triage desk, Ethan was standing with his back to me, his broad shoulders hunched over Brooke, who sat comfortably on a rolling chair sipping water from a paper cup. He was rubbing her back in slow, rhythmic circles. I closed my eyes, let the heavy iron doors of the elevator slide shut, and felt the last remaining ember of my 3-year love turn to stone. The CT scan showed a mild concussion and a 3-inch laceration across my right parietal bone. It took 7 stitches to close the wound. By the time they wheeled me back into the private room, the sterile white bandage wrapped around my head was stark against my pale skin. My mother, Eleanor, was sitting by the bed, her face pale, her hands trembling. As she smoothed my blanket, her eyes were red-rimmed, but her jaw was set in granite. My father, Professor Marcus Vance, stood by the window, his coat still on, holding his phone to his ear. Yes, Commissioner Wright, my father said into the receiver, his tone razor sharp. The assault took place inside room 402 of the university-affiliated hospital. The perpetrator is currently in the lower lobby. I want the surveillance footage from the 4th floor corridor preserved. Immediately. My family will be pressing full criminal charges. The door swung open. Ethan walked in. He had taken off his jacket, carrying a plastic bag containing 2 bottles of juice and a small box of bakery cookies. His hair was messy and he had that exhausted, self-satisfied look of a man who had successfully played the hero for an hour. Chloe, he started, his voice adopting that familiar, patronizing tone he always used after our fights. I got Brooke settled in an outpatient cubicle. The doctor said her lower back is just bruised, but she's traumatized. I brought you some. He stopped dead in his tracks. He saw the thick gauze wrapped around my skull. He saw the crimson stains on the collar of my fresh gown. And then his eyes landed on my father. Ethan's face went entirely white. Professor Vance. Eleanor. You're here. My father didn't answer. He didn't even look at the gift bag in Ethan's hand. Simply slid his phone into his pocket and stood up straight, towering over Ethan. With the full weight of his academic and social authority. Ethan, my father said calmly. Did you push my daughter? Ethan's Adam's apple bobbed violently. He took a half step back, his hands waving in frantic, uncoordinated gestures. Professor, it was an accident. I swear to God, it was an accident. Brooke fell. And she's had back issues since college, and Chloe was yelling. I just reached out to separate them, and Chloe lost her balance. She lost her balance? My mother asked, her voice shaking with controlled rage. You threw a girl with a 104-degree fever into a sharp wooden corner, left her bleeding on the floor, and carried your mistress out the door. That is not an accident, Ethan. That is domestic violence. She isn't my mistress. Ethan screamed, his voice cracking with panic. Chloe, tell them we just had a disagreement. I looked at him from the pillows. The man who had gained 10 pounds eating another woman's lasagna. The man who had sent explicit texts detailing our intimate life to his ex-girlfriend just to prove he could hurt her. The man who had looked down at my bleeding head with disgust and walked away. Officer, I said, looking past his shoulder. That is the man who assaulted me. 2 uniformed police officers stepped through the doorway behind Ethan. The taller officer tapped Ethan on the shoulder. Ethan Sterling. Ethan froze, his eyes bulging. Yes? What is this? Officer, this is a family misunderstanding. You are under arrest for domestic battery and assault resulting in bodily injury, the officer said, grabbing Ethan's right arm and twisting it behind his back with practiced efficiency. Click. The cold steel of the handcuff snapped shut over his wrist. Wait. No. Professor Vance, please. Ethan shrieked, struggling against the officer's grip as his plastic bag of cookies fell to the floor, spilling across the tiles. I have my doctoral defense in 3 weeks. If I have a police record, the university will suspend my degree. Chloe, please tell them to stop. I love you. You know I love you. My father stepped forward, looking down at his star pupil with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. You don't have a doctoral defense in 3 weeks, Ethan, my father said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. As of 10 minutes ago, I have officially resigned as your principal dissertation advisor. I have also submitted a formal notification to the Academic Integrity Committee regarding the unauthorized use of university laboratory equipment for your private consultancy tests. Ethan's jaw went slack. The breath left his lungs in a sharp, wheezing gasp. You're dropping me? You're done, Ethan, my father said quietly. Take him out. The officers hauled Ethan backward through the doorway. His heels dragged against the linoleum, his hysterical cries echoing down the hallway for everyone to hear. Chloe, don't do this to me. Brooke, help me. Brooke. The next morning, the rain washed over the city in gray, relentless sheets. My fever had broken, but the stitches at the back of my head throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache. I refused to spend another hour in that hospital bed, dressed in a thick cashmere sweater, a dark coat, and a wide-brimmed wool hat that covered my bandages. I walked out of the hospital accompanied by our family's senior corporate attorney, Robert Lang. The real estate documents are clear, Miss Vance, Robert said, handing me a leather-bound folder inside the back of my father's town car. The deed for the new property at 88 Riverside Court was executed under a joint tenancy with right of survivorship, but the purchase funds were drawn directly from your personal trust account. You provided $420,000 for the down payment and closing costs. Mr. Sterling contributed zero capital. His name was added based on your signed intent to marry. And the mortgage? I asked, looking out the tinted window. The mortgage is in his name, but you signed as the primary guarantor, Robert replied with a thin, predatory smile. Since the marriage has not occurred and, given the pending felony charges against him, we have already filed an emergency civil injunction for partition by sale and immediate exclusive occupancy. Good, I said, tapping my fingers against the leather folder. Let's go take back my house. When our car pulled up to the security gates of Riverside Court, the rain was coming down harder. We took the elevator to the 12th floor. The moment the brass doors opened, the sound of loud, frantic barking echoed through the private hallway. The door to Unit 12B was unlocked. I pushed it open. The sight inside made my stomach turn. The high-end Italian porcelain tiles I had spent 3 months selecting were covered in dark paw prints and dog hair. The white marble kitchen island was cluttered with greasy takeout boxes, half-eaten pizza crusts, and empty soda cans. On my custom-made, $9,000 imported Belgian linen sofa, Brooke was curled up in a fleece bathrobe, eating cereal out of a mixing bowl, while her Pomeranian chewed aggressively on the corner of a designer velvet throw pillow. When she saw me walk in with a 6'2" attorney and 2 private locksmiths, Brooke froze, the silver spoon hovering inches from her mouth. "Chloe," she gasped, scrambling up from the couch, her eyes darting toward the empty corridor behind me. "Where is Ethan? His phone has been off all night. Did you do something to him?" "Ethan is currently in county holding on a $50,000 bond for felony assault," I said calmly, stepping into the foyer and gesturing to the locksmiths. "Change the master cylinder and the digital keypad. Code 0000 until I set the new biometric lock." "Right away, Miss Vance," the locksmith replied, immediately setting his toolbox on the floor. Brooke's face went through 3 distinct shades of pale before settling on a violent, hysterical red. "You had him arrested?" she screamed, dropping her cereal bowl onto the coffee table, milk sloshing over the polished glass. "He's your fiancé. He only pushed you because you attacked me. I have back injuries, Chloe. I'm the victim here." "You're a trespasser," Robert Lang spoke up, stepping forward and handing her a crisp, legal notice stamped with the county court's red seal. "Miss Vance is the sole equity holder of this property. You have exactly 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings, remove your animal, and vacate the premises. If you are still inside this unit at 11:30 a.m., the building security team and the sheriff's department will remove you by force." "This is Ethan's house," Brooke shrieked, waving her arms wildly. "His name is on the mortgage. He told me I could live here. He told me this was our fresh start." "Ethan doesn't own a single square inch of this floor, Miss Vance," Robert said coldly. "And unless he has $420,000 in liquid cash to buy out my client's equity interest by tomorrow morning, this property will be listed for immediate public auction." Brooke stood in the middle of the ruined living room, looking around at the white roses she had placed on the table, the pink slipcovers she had thrown over my furniture, and the bubbling stew pot she had used to feed Ethan his favorite grease. Her lips trembled. Her hands shook. Then she dropped to her knees, looking up at me with those wide, tearful, puppy dog eyes that had kept Ethan on a leash for 10 years. "Chloe, please," she sobbed, clutching her Pomeranian against her chest like a shield. "I have nowhere to go. My parents disowned me. I don't have a job. I don't have any savings. If you kick me out in this rain, I'll have to sleep on the street." "Ethan loved you, Chloe, he really did. He just felt responsible for me. Can't you just let me stay in the guest room until he posts bail?" I looked down at her. I saw the calculated angle of her head, the precise quiver of her chin, the weaponized fragility that had made Ethan look at me, his devoted, hard-working partner, as an abusive monster. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, stopped 3 inches from her knees, and looked into her eyes. "Brooke," I whispered, my voice completely devoid of warmth. 26 minutes left. I turned on my heel and walked toward the master bedroom. "Get your trash out of my bed," I said without looking back. "Or the movers will throw it straight into the incinerator chute." By 1 p.m., Brooke was gone. She had left 3 bulging garbage bags of cheap clothes on the sidewalk, sitting under the building's awning in the pouring rain with her shivering dog, frantically dialing every mutual friend from her college days. I didn't stay in that apartment. I hired a commercial hazmat cleaning crew to strip every piece of linen, every mattress, and every carpet out of the unit. The $9,000 bed was dismantled and hauled away to a charity warehouse. The pink slipcovers were thrown into the dumpster behind the garage. I sold the unit 3 days later to an overseas investor at a 5% discount for all cash, pocketing my entire down payment plus $80,000 in market appreciation. Meanwhile, Ethan's bail was posted by his elderly parents, who had to drain their entire retirement savings to secure the $5,000 for the bondsman. When Ethan walked out of the county holding facility on Thursday morning, he looked like a broken shell. His clothes were wrinkled and smelled of sour sweat. His eyes were sunken dark, purple rings circling his sockets, and his 10-pound weight gain hung awkwardly on his frame, making his posture look slouched and pathetic. Waiting for him at the curb was not my luxury SUV. It was Brooke, sitting in a rusted, 10-year-old Honda Civic she had borrowed from a distant cousin, holding an umbrella with 2 broken spokes. "Ethan," she cried, running up to throw her arms around his neck. "You're out. Thank God you're out." Ethan didn't hug her back. He stood in the cold morning drizzle, his jaw tight, his eyes darting around the empty street. "Where is Chloe?" he croaked, his voice hoarse from 2 days of screaming in a holding cell. Did she come with you? Where is her car? Brooke's face tightened with bitter resentment. She kicked me out, Ethan. He brought lawyers and locksmiths. She sold the house. She had all your research files locked out of the university server. She's a monster, Ethan. She doesn't care about you at all. Ethan's knees buckled. He grabbed the door of the rusted Civic to keep from falling. She sold the house? Yes. And my wrist still hurts from the hot soup you spilled. Brooke wailed, pulling on his arm. Get in the car, Ethan. I rented a small studio apartment on the south side with the money my cousin lent me. I made beef stew for you. You must be starving. For the first time in 10 years, the words beef stew did not sound like comfort. To Ethan, they sounded like the clinking of chains. He looked at the rusted Civic. He looked at Brooke's messy, bleached hair, her cheap polyester jacket, and the small, yapping dog shivering in the passenger seat. Then he remembered the life he had 3 days ago. A penthouse apartment on Riverside Court. A custom-made Italian tuxedo waiting in the garment bag. A gorgeous, brilliant, wealthy fiancé whose father was the most powerful academic figure in the state. An executive research position waiting for him upon graduation. A clean, healthy diet of organic greens and fresh salmon that had kept his skin clear and his mind sharp. He had traded an empire for a bowl of greasy stew. Ethan, Brooke asked, tugging his wet sleeve. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? Nothing, Ethan muttered, his voice hollow as an empty grave as he climbed into the cramped, mold-scented passenger seat. Let's go. 2 weeks later, the academic integrity hearing of the Department of Mechanical and Electrical Engineering was convened in the Central Administrative Hall of the university. The room was paneled in dark walnut, cold and formal. Sitting behind the elevated mahogany bench were 6 tenured department heads, the dean of the graduate school, and the university legal counsel. At the center of the room sat Ethan Sterling, wearing the only clean suit he had left, a cheap polyester blend he had bought off the rack at a department store discount outlet. His face was gray, his eyes hollowed out by sleepless nights in the moldy Southside studio, his fingers twitching uncontrollably against his knees. Beside him sat a junior public defender appointed to his criminal case. On the other side of the aisle sat my father, Professor Marcus Vance, dressed in his immaculate academic regalia, alongside Robert Lang. I sat in the second row of the public gallery, wearing a tailored cream blazer, my hair parted neatly to conceal the faint, fading scar near my right temple. Mr. Sterling, the dean began, adjusting his half-moon spectacles. We are here to review the formal complaint submitted by Professor Vance regarding the structural data fabrication in your doctoral thesis, as well as the unauthorized commercial licensing of university-owned sensor algorithms to private entities. Ethan jumped to his feet, his voice cracking with hysteria. It's a vendetta. Dean, you have to understand. Professor Vance is doing this because I broke off my personal relationship with his daughter. This is personal retaliation. My research is sound. I spent 4 years in that lab. Is that so, Mr. Sterling? Robert Lang asked, standing up with a leather-bound folder. He walked over to the projection console and inserted a flash drive. With the committee's permission, we would like to enter Exhibit D into the record, a certified deposition provided 48 hours ago by Mr. Julian Mercer, the former chief technology officer of Apex Dynamics. The name Julian Mercer hit Ethan like a physical blow. His knees wobbled. He gripped the edge of his table, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. On the massive projection screen at the front of the hall, a high-definition video deposition began to play. Julian Mercer, Ethan's former best friend from high school, the man who had supposedly slept with Brooke 4 years ago, sat in a brightly lit conference room in Chicago, looking straight into the camera. My name is Julian Mercer, the video began. I am providing this statement voluntarily to clear the public record regarding Mr. Ethan Sterling and Miss Brooke Vance. Julian leaned forward on the screen, his expression full of cold, clinical disgust. 4 years ago, Brooke Vance approached me at a hotel lounge during the National Engineering Symposium in Boston. She told me Ethan was a broke graduate student who would never amount to anything, and that she wanted to secure an introduction to my father's venture capital firm. When I refused her advances, she deliberately staged an encounter in my hotel room, knowing Ethan was tracking her phone's GPS. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Ethan's face went from gray to a terrifying, mottled purple. Why did she do it? The investigating attorney on the video asked. Because she wanted to force Ethan into an emotional crisis where he would become entirely dependent on her approval, Julian replied on the tape. And, more importantly, because she had already stolen Ethan's preliminary sensor code from his laptop and sold it to me for $25,000 to pay off her credit card debts. Julian looked directly into the camera lens, holding up a certified bank transfer slip and an email thread dating back 4 years. Ethan didn't invent that algorithm, gentlemen. He copied the core mathematical framework from Professor Marcus Vance's 2018 research papers and gave it to Brooke. When Brooke sold it to me, she told me Ethan was just her little scholarship boy who would do whatever she wanted as long as she cried and cooked him dinner. The video cut to black. The silence in the grand administrative hall was so heavy you could hear the rain tapping against the high stained glass windows. Ethan slowly turned his head toward the back of the gallery. Sitting in the third row, wearing an oversized knit sweater and holding her purse like a shield, was Brooke. Her face was chalk white. Her eyes were darting toward the double exit doors, her lower lip trembling in pure, unadulterated terror. "You," Ethan whispered, the sound tearing out of his throat like a dying gasp. "You sold my code? 4 years ago, in Boston, you sold my thesis to Julian for $25,000. Brooke scrambled to her feet, backing toward the aisle. "Ethan, listen to me. It wasn't like that. I had debts. My father was threatening to sue me. Julian lied to you. You let me believe you cheated on me with my best friend for 4 years." Ethan roared, his voice breaking into a monstrous, ragged shriek that rattled the light fixtures. "I spent 4 years hating myself. I spent 4 years thinking I wasn't man enough for you. I dated Chloe just to prove I could have a beautiful, brilliant woman. I sent you photos of us in bed just to make you bleed like I bled." He lunged across the aisle, completely ignoring the university security guards, knocking over chairs and tables as he threw himself toward Brooke. "You ruined my life. You took my degree. You took Chloe. You took everything from me. Get him off me. Help. He's crazy," Brooke screamed, dropping her purse as Ethan's fingers caught the collar of her sweater. 3 campus police officers tackled Ethan to the carpet, twisting his arms behind his back, forcing his face into the wool pile as he thrashed, sobbed, and spat bloody foam onto the floor. "Order! Order in this hall!" the dean shouted, slamming his gavel repeatedly. "Security, remove the defendant. The committee will now vote on the immediate expulsion of Ethan Sterling from the graduate registry." I stood up from my seat in the second row. I smoothed the lapels of my tailored cream blazer, adjusted my watch, and turned toward my father, who was calmly closing his leather briefcase. "Ready to go, Dad?" I asked softly. My father looked at me, his eyes full of warmth, pride, and an unshakable peace. "Let's go home, sweetheart," he smiled. "Your mother made salmon for dinner." We walked down the center aisle, stepping over Ethan's dropped notes and Brooke's scattered lipstick, walking out through the grand oak doors into the bright, clean afternoon sunlight. Behind us, Ethan's muffled, suffocating screams continued to echo against the walnut walls. "Chloe! Chloe, please! Look at me! I didn't know! Chloe!" I didn't turn around. Not once. 6 months later, the summer heat in the city was thick and humid, turning the concrete streets into baking ovens. In a cramped, half-basement studio apartment near the industrial rail yards, the smell of burnt vegetable oil and damp drywall hung heavy in the stagnant air. Ethan sat on the edge of a second-hand mattress, wearing a threadbare gray t-shirt stained with yellow sweat rings around the collar. His weight had ballooned another 15 pounds. His belly spilled over the waistband of his faded shorts, his face puffy, his breath coming in shallow, wheezing gasps even while sitting still. His fatty liver had progressed to stage 2 steatohepatitis. Every morning, dull, throbbing ache flared beneath his right ribs, but he had no health insurance to buy the prescription medication, surviving on cheap generic painkillers from the convenience store down the street. Across the tiny room, Brooke was standing over a rusted hot plate, frying frozen pork patties in a warped skillet. She looked 20 years older. Her bleached hair had grown out into 4 inches of dark, greasy roots. Her face was lined with deep, bitter creases, and her voice had turned into a permanent, grating rasp. "The landlord came by again today," Brooke snapped, flipping the gray meat with a bent fork, hot grease splattering across the peeling wallpaper. "He says if we don't have the $800 for the back rent by Friday, he's throwing our mattresses out onto the curb." Ethan didn't answer. He stared at his laptop screen. He had spent the last 4 months applying for entry-level drafting jobs, lab technician positions, and even community college tutoring gigs. Every single application was rejected within 48 hours. His name was permanently flagged on the state higher education registry for academic fraud and research theft. His felony assault conviction had been resolved with a guilty plea to misdemeanor battery, 3 years of strict probation, and a mandatory $5,000 restitution fine payable to the Vance family. He was currently working 20 hours a week as an overnight inventory clerk at a suburban discount auto parts warehouse, earning $12 an hour. "Are you deaf, Ethan?" Brooke yelled, slamming the spatula onto the counter. Asked you about the rent. What did your parents say? My parents don't have any money, Brooke, Ethan said, his voice flat, devoid of all life. They sold their car last month to pay the legal fees for the hearing. My father won't speak to me. He told me that if I ever show up at their house again, he'll call the police. Useless, Brooke sneered, tossing a burned patty onto a chipped plastic plate and setting it in front of him. You were supposed to be a university professor. You were supposed to have a six-figure consulting salary and a house on Riverside Court. Now look at you. You're a fat, broke, convicted loser who can't even afford to take me to dinner. Ethan looked down at the gray, greasy meat sitting in front of him. He remembered the organic arugula salads with grilled lemon chicken I used to pack in his glass containers every morning. He remembered the crisp, tailored lines of his custom wedding tuxedo that he had once called a trivial piece of cloth. He remembered my voice from 3 years ago, sitting on the balcony under the evening breeze. Ethan, for your health, let's cut back on the heavy oils. I want us to live a long, beautiful life together. He had called that love abuse. He had called Brooke's cheap, toxic grease true passion. Why don't you get a job, Brooke? Ethan asked quietly, not looking up. Brooke let out a sharp, hysterical laugh. A job? With my back? After you threw me onto the floor in the hospital. I'm disabled. Etan. You owe me for the rest of your life. Ethan slowly picked up his fork, cut off a piece of the burned, rubbery pork, and put it into his mouth. It tasted like ash, salt, and rot. He chewed slowly, mechanically, tears of absolute, bottomless despair finally leaking from his swollen eyes, dripping down his cheeks, and seasoning the bitter meat on his tongue. 1 year later, the grand ballroom of the Four Seasons Hotel overlooking the harbor was bathed in warm golden light. The air smelled of fresh white lilies, roasted pine nuts, and vintage champagne. Over 400 prominent engineers, international tech executives, and university chancellors gathered in black tie attire for the annual National Innovation Awards Gala. I stood near the panoramic glass terrace, holding a glass of sparkling cider. I wore a custom-tailored, backless evening gown of midnight blue silk velvet that hugged my curves with effortless, breathtaking elegance. My dark hair was swept up into an intricate, modern chignon, completely revealing the clean, unblemished line of my neck. Beside me stood my father, dressed in his formal tuxedo, laughing with the chief technology officer of a global renewable energy firm. And here is the real architect behind the high-efficiency thermal patent. My father smiled, introducing me with a proud wave of his hand. My daughter, Chloe Vance. She just completed her term as the Director of Innovation Strategy for the State Green Energy Task Force. The CTO shook my hand with genuine reverence. Miss Vance, your paper on decentralized sensor grids was brilliant. Our European board would like to offer your firm the lead consulting contract for the North Sea project. I would be delighted, Mr. Harrison. I smiled, my voice clear, steady, and radiant. My team will send the preliminary structural models by Monday morning. As the conversation flowed smoothly, my gaze casually drifted toward the glass entrance doors of the hotel lobby. Outside the brass revolving doors, standing on the rainy public sidewalk behind the velvet security ropes, was a lone figure. Ethan Sterling. He was wearing a faded, oversized yellow rain poncho, holding a damp delivery bag from a local food app. He was thinner now, not the healthy, athletic thinness of his youth, but the gaunt, sallow emaciation of chronic illness and physical exhaustion. His shoulders were permanently hunched, his face pale and sunken beneath a wet baseball cap. He had just delivered an order of hot soup to the hotel's front desk. Through the clear plate glass, his bloodshot eyes locked onto the ballroom. He saw me. He saw the glittering diamond earrings catching the chandelier light. He saw the wealthy, powerful men and women shaking my hand with admiration. He saw the radiant, untouchable grace of a woman who had completely, beautifully outgrown the poison of his existence. He saw the life he could have shared. He saw the kingdom he had burned to the ground with his own selfish, cowardly hands. Our eyes met across 50 yards of light and glass. I didn't flinch. I didn't sneer. I didn't feel a single flicker of anger, hatred, or vindication. I simply looked at him the way one looks at an empty plastic bottle blowing across a wet road, a piece of discarded rubbish that no longer had any meaning in a world filled with sunlight. I lifted my glass of sparkling cider toward the harbor lights, turned my back on the rain, and smiled as I walked deeper into the warmth of the grand hall. Behind me, the brass doors spun, the delivery boy stepped back into the freezing dark, and the music played on.